Jack's footsteps echoed on the cobblestone streets of Montmartre as he ascended the winding hill, the sound muted by the thick Parisian fog that clung to the early evening air. It had been 5 years since he'd last walked this path, and yet the memories felt so fresh they could have been yesterday's. The narrow streets, once bustling with artists, locals, and lively music, now carried a quieter, more subdued energy. War had scarred the city, but its heart still beat with a resilient rhythm. He stopped in front of what remained of the little café at the corner of Rue Gabriel. Once a beacon of warmth with its green awnings and the scent of fresh baguettes drifting out, it was now a ghost of its former self. The sign hung crooked, the paint faded and peeling. Broken windows hinted at a violence that had left marks on both people and places alike. Jack's eyes scanned the empty tables outside, still imagining the days when he'd been one of those weary soldiers nursing a cup of coffee, stealing glances at the young French woman with the dark hair and fierce eyes. Elise. The name alone stirred something deep within him, a blend of hope and sorrow, longing and regret. She had been part of the resistance, bravely fighting in secret while serving coffee with a smile. They had shared stolen moments, brief and intense, never knowing if they'd see another sunrise. But time had separated them, and the war had torn them further apart. Pushing the café's heavy door, Jack was greeted by silence. The once busy establishment was barely alive. Only a few tables remained, and the faint light from a single flickering bulb cast long shadows across the room. His heart sank as he took in the emptiness. The café wasn't just a building, it was a memory of a different life, a life where love had seemed possible, even amid ruin. But then he saw her. Elise stood behind the counter, wiping down a chipped coffee cup with a cloth. Time had altered her, as it had altered them all, but she was unmistakable. Her dark hair was a little shorter now, curling just below her chin. Her face was thinner, more defined, and a faint scar marred her left cheek, a memento of the battles she had fought. But those sharp green eyes, filled with a guarded strength, remained unchanged. She looked up and met his gaze. For a moment, neither moved. Jack felt a wave of memories crashing down upon him, carrying with them the ache of missed opportunities and words left unsaid. "Elise," he finally whispered, his voice catching in his throat. Her eyes widened, and the cloth fell from her hand. The room seemed to hold its breath, the silence thick with unspoken emotions. She took a step forward, then another, until they were face to face. Up close, Jack could see the toll the years had taken on her, the fine lines etched around her eyes, the way her lips pressed together as though holding back years' worth of feelings. "Jack," she breathed, barely above a whisper. Her voice was laced with disbelief, as if she were seeing a ghost. They stood there, studying each other, memories swirling between them. Jack wasn't sure if he should reach out, say something, or simply leave before the reality of the moment shattered what little hope he'd dared to bring with him. "I thought you were gone," Elise said, her voice steadying, but her eyes still searching his as if trying to piece together the man before her with the soldier she had known. "I was sent home after the liberation," Jack replied. "But I couldn't forget this place or you." Elise's eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite decipher, relief, perhaps, or the fear that it was all too late. She gestured to a table near the window, one that still held some remnants of its former charm, with a lace cloth and a vase holding a single wilting flower. They sat across from each other, both hesitant, unsure of how to begin again. "So, you stayed?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. Elise nodded. "There wasn't much choice. My family, well, I'm all that's left. The café is all I have now." Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. He'd heard about the losses the resistance members had suffered, the reprisals, the betrayals. He couldn't imagine what Elise had gone through, Yet here she was, still standing, still fighting in her own way. "I'm sorry," he murmured, feeling the inadequacy of his words. Elise shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Don't be. We all lost something. But life moves on, doesn't it?" Jack looked out the window at the familiar streets, now bathed in the soft glow of street lamps. "It does. But some things stay with you no matter how much time passes." Their eyes met again, and this time there was no need for words. They had both carried the weight of those years apart, carried it in silence, carried it with regret. The connection they had once shared, fleeting as it had been, had never really died. It had only been buried under layers of time, loss, and fear. Elise rose from her seat and walked behind the counter. Jack watched as she pulled out a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. She returned and poured them each a drink, the rich liquid swirling in the glasses like the emotions that churned between them. "To surviving," she said, raising her glass. Jack lifted his, a bittersweet smile on his lips. "To finding each other again." They drank in silence, letting the wine fill the spaces where words failed. The warmth spread through Jack's chest, easing the tightness he hadn't realized was there. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of peace, a sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a future beyond the shadows of the past. "What happens now?" Elise asked softly, her eyes meeting his with an openness that had been absent moments ago. Jack set his glass down and leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't know," he admitted. "I came here looking for something. Maybe I was looking for you. Maybe I was looking for a way to feel alive again." Elise's expression softened, and the guarded walls around her seemed to crack just a little. "I've been living day to day, keeping this place running because it's all I know. But every day, I've wondered what it would be like if things had been different. If we had more time, more chances." The confession hung between them, fragile and honest. Jack reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were calloused and worn from years of hard work, but they fit perfectly in his. He could feel the pulse of her heartbeat in that small connection, a steady reminder that they were both still here, still fighting. "We have time now," he said, his voice filled with a hope he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "It's not too late, Elise. We can build something new, together." Elise's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for the first time, the tension in her face relaxed into a genuine smile. It was the same smile that had once drawn him in all those years ago, a smile that had whispered promises of something more, even in the darkest of times. "I never imagined you'd come back," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Jack squeezed her hand gently. "I didn't imagine I'd find you still here. But maybe this place was waiting for us. Maybe we both were." They sat in silence for a while longer, just holding hands, letting the quiet comfort them. The world outside continued on, but within the walls of that little café, time seemed to pause, allowing them to reclaim what had been lost. Eventually, the fog outside thickened, and the streetlights cast long, soft shadows across the café's floor. Jack knew he should leave, but the thought of walking away now, of letting this moment slip through his fingers, felt impossible. "I have to close up soon," Elise said, though her voice held no urgency. It was more an acknowledgement of the world outside, of the fact that they couldn't stay frozen in time forever. "Let me walk you home," Jack offered, standing and pulling his coat back on. It was a simple gesture, one that carried with it 1,000 unspoken words. Elise nodded, and together they stepped out into the misty evening. The streets of Montmartre were quieter now, the bustle of the day giving way to the soft hum of night. They walked side by side, saying little, but the comfort of each other's presence spoke volumes. As they reached the doorway of a small apartment above a bakery, Elise turned to face him. Her expression was a mixture of gratitude, uncertainty, and something else, something deeper, more hopeful. "Thank you, Jack," she said softly, "for coming back, for finding me." He stepped closer, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for waiting." For a moment, they stood there, the weight of everything between them balanced on the precipice of what might be. And then, in a gesture that felt both inevitable and long overdue, Jack leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss that carried all the pain, longing, and hope of the years they'd lost, but also the promise of what lay ahead. When they pulled away, Elise's eyes were shining, and Jack felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the cool night air. There were no more words needed. They had found each other again in a world that had tried to break them, and now they had a chance to write a new story together, a story of second chances and love rekindled in the heart of Montmartre. And in that quiet corner of Paris, the café that had once been a place of refuge and resistance now held the promise of a future where love could bloom once more.